Hi, I'm Nick Palmisciano,
And I'm Matt Finney.
and this is the Bad News Network. We're going into Memorial Day weekend, and I know this is a very hard time for a lot of people. So I want to do something a little different today, and I just want to talk about one of my friends that passed away. His name was William Mayer III, but we just called him Bill Mayer. Typically don't do that anymore because everybody thinks of Bill Maher whenever I talk about him, but William Mayer. He was a mortarman, and he was a really interesting guy. He was when I was in the mortar platoon with 136 Infantry, he was a specialist, and we called him the old man because he was like 30 at the time, 31. He had been a professional chef in Aspen, and a badass snowboarder, and made the decision that he wanted to serve. So in the military, ages are completely warped. So a 31-year-old is crazy old. So he comes in as an infantryman, as a mortarman, and he was just a clown 24/7. Just a hilarious dude. He used to piss off his squad leader, Sergeant Bruning, who was like, the only way I can describe him is like, he is like a chiseled guy that like looks like he belongs in the movie Cyborg, square jaw, Aryan, huge. And then you had Bill, who was just this clown, not a huge dude, kind of a wiry little guy, and just always talking shit. But like not in a way that you really get him in trouble, just in a way where like, he's always doing push-ups or something. He was the clown of the unit. Lived his life hard. On the weekends, he was traveling somewhere to see Europe, to snowboard. Everything about him was positive. When 9/11 hit and all of a sudden, everything was nuts and we didn't know what to do, he broke out his chef expertise. And while we were, pulling guard all over Europe because we thought there was like an impending attack, Bill was making these great meals to share with everybody. And you try never to have like a favorite person in your platoon, especially when you're an officer, but he was one of those guys that you just love to have around. And, I moved on to my next unit, and one of my buddies, actually, a couple years younger, ended up taking the mortar platoon. And, a couple years later, I was out of the military. I had just gotten out. I had just arrived at Duke University. Literally had been at Duke for maybe 2 days. And I got a phone call that Bill had been killed. IED, and he was sitting next to my buddy, who at the time I had no idea, what his condition was. Jared Crane, who ended up just, not just, but took some shrapnel in the face and was wounded, but ended up being okay in the long run. But the loss of Bill was crushing in a way that it's hard to explain to people that haven't gone through it. But even though the war had been going for a while, and I kind of tangentially knew guys that had died, it hadn't really kicked off yet. It wasn't really, what it was going to become. And he was the first guy that really was a part of me that we lost. And all of the emotions that so many of you are going through hit me, and they hit me in a weird way because I was now out. I was now a civilian, and I was sitting at Duke University, and there were, it was like this beautiful, nice place, rich kids, pretty girls. We were going out, drinking, having a good time, having the college experience that I never had. And all of a sudden I got yanked back to like, I'm such a piece of shit for having left the military. Like, I should have been there. I should be in right now. I'm doing this other thing that isn't service, that is for me. And it put me in a bad place for a long time. And even now, like I'm getting emotional thinking about that moment. I still remember where I was sitting down at this shitty desk that I bought for like $98 that was going to be like my, do homework desk. And I got the call, and it's seared into memory. And I know so many of you have that memory, and so many of you have even worse memories where you were actually there, when you lost your friends. And so this weekend, I really want you to think about not letting that overwhelm you. I think it's important to remember. I think it's important to remember their lives. But I think it's important that you don't start thinking that you don't deserve whatever it is that you have right now. And that's something that I had to fight through. And one of the things that helps me a lot is I think about how Bill lived his life. And I don't think that he wasted a second of it. I think that he lived his life to the fullest. And I think that if he were to look back, I don't think he would have regrets. I think he did everything that he ever wanted to do. And many of the decisions that I've made in my life, I try to think about in the same way. Whenever I'm sitting there going, should I take this risk? Should I try this thing that I've never done? Should I go for it? I just think, what would Bill do right now? Like, he would do it. He would go for it. Why not? And it helps put things into perspective. Whatever bad thing that you're going through, you still have time. We still have time. And I feel like that we owe it to the people that we've lost to maximize that time, to do everything that we want to do, everything that we dream of, to go for it. Because when I think about the old man, Bill died at 35. And at the time, that was old, but goddamn, it just isn't old. And I think about what he didn't get to have. He didn't get to have kids. He didn't get to have, a civilian experience after the military. He didn't get to have, all the travel plans that I know he had. And, his life ended in that moment. And I always think that if I live a half-assed life, that I've wasted an opportunity and that he would be disappointed in me. And I don't want to think that. I don't ever want to think that. So one of the big driving forces in my life always is I've got a limited amount of time on this planet. I don't know if it's going to end in 40 years, 20 years, tomorrow, but I don't ever want to regret my decisions. I don't ever want to feel bad about not doing the right thing. I don't ever want to feel bad about being afraid, to go for it, to stand up for myself, to stand up for my family, to stand up for others, to do things that are unpopular. And I think all of you, if you think back at the people that you've lost, will feel the same way. And so this Memorial Day, those of you that are having a rough time, use that energy. Do the things that you're afraid to do. Fight through the hard times, especially with all this COVID shit going on right now. I know a lot of people are suffering, but bear down and fight through it and go for it, because that is 100% what our brothers and sisters in arms would want. So have a good Memorial Day. And with that, let's go to the bad news and see how everybody's screwing up this country.
India is experiencing a natural disaster during the pandemic. Cyclone Amphan made landfall this Wednesday in and around the Bangladesh area. 80 people have been killed and the damage has been catastrophic, with thousands losing their homes. To put it in perspective, there are approximately 330 million people spread across the US. In Bangladesh alone, there are 160 million people, all contained within an area the size of Iowa. Emergency services all across the coastal areas of India are all trying to balance helping people with recovery efforts as well as balancing helping people with coronavirus. More bad news. The region isn't out of the weeds yet, as precipitation from the storm moving inland is expected to create flash flooding. Hang in there, India.
Air Force Special Operations Command has put in a request to get a new weapon in development this year. The weapon? An AC-130 with a giant freaking laser. Some of you may be wondering, why does an AC-130 need a laser? Doesn't it have enough guns already? Lieutenant General Bradley Heithold, however, stated that with the current weaponry, everybody knows you're there. The goal is to make the AC-130 the quietest deliverer of kick-assery in the sky. He went on to say that traditional weapons are quasi-evil, semi-evil, the Diet Pepsi of evil, 1 calorie, just not evil enough.
Bellingcat reported this week that a beer review app can be used to track military personnel and reveal secret locations. The app, called Untapped, allows users to reveal their favorite beers, try new places, check in at bars, and even unlock achievements. But with just a little bit of OSINT digging and cross-referencing of data, one of Bellingcat's reporters was able to identify when and where U.S. military and intelligence personnel were. Photos by drunk users have revealed the locations of F-16 planes, debit card information, and more sensitive material. Because drunk people make the best decisions.
A Pennsylvania man was arrested after he doused a 4-year-old boy with gasoline and threatened to burn the demons out of him. Josiah James McIntosh, age 27, is facing aggravated assault charges among other charges. The incident happened at Southmont Borough, just outside of Johnstown. Officers responded to a domestic disturbance and found the boy and McIntosh smelling of gasoline, with McIntosh holding a lighter. A man who arrived at the home before police said McIntosh told him, "If we can't get the demon out of him, we'll burn it out." The man said he tried to stop McIntosh, but McIntosh punched him in the face and then hit him in the head with a brick before fleeing. Police say that they found damages to the man's left side along with significant damage to his ear. Authorities found McIntosh after a brief search of the neighborhood, charged him with aggravated assault in addition to reckless endangerment and child endangerment. This reminds me a little bit of my time growing up in Italy. There was an old man next door that was tired of all the kids playing outside, so he came out and said, "If you don't shut up, I'm going to pour boiling water all over you." Now here's the thing about Italy. Italian women are scary, and all the moms in the neighborhood heard this old man scream that from the second floor of the building next door. Next thing you know, my next door neighbor Franca had the biggest knife that I had ever seen in my life. It's important to note that I was 5 or 6 at the time and fluent in Italian. Franca told him that she was going to cut off his balls and feed them to him if he ever said anything to any of the kids ever again. I learned a lot that day about what was truly possible with violence. Thank you, Franca. Anyway, the point of my story was that if this had happened in Italy, he would be dead already.
Police in Louisa, Virginia took to social media to find 2 masked robbers who on May 6th robbed a convenience store with watermelon rinds wrapped around their heads. Surveillance cameras at a Sheetz convenience store were caught in the act, but were able to avoid authorities due to their excellent disguises. That is until Sunday, when authorities arrested 20-year-old Justin Rogers in what the media were calling the melon drama. Rogers was booked on 3 charges: larceny of alcohol, possession of alcohol of an underage person, and prohibition of wearing a face mask in public, which is ironic. Police are still on the lookout for the second melon head. A customer at the convenience store thought that the mask fell between the thin line between brilliant and stupid. They said that it's innovative but ridiculous. The amount of time that it takes to hollow out a melon and fit it to your stupid head is just a little out of this world.
The European Space Agency announced this week that urine will someday likely be the building block for concrete development on the moon. Urea, the main ingredient in urine, apparently makes concrete more malleable before hardening than water alone. This, coupled with the powdery soil on the moon known as lunar regolith, actually creates an incredibly efficient concrete that requires less liquid than normal concrete. When scientists came to this conclusion, they shouted, "Urea!" Basically, using nothing but lunar powder and 1.5 liters of urine a day. Astronauts could build an entire building out of concrete over the course of one stay on the moon. This puts a whole new level to the phrase, pissing excellence.
A professional soccer team in South Korea had to issue an apology this week for filling its empty stands with sex dolls. The team explained that it was just trying to alleviate the awkwardness of having no fans in the stands during the game and had no idea that the company was supplying them with sex dolls instead of regular mannequins. In the statement issued by the team, they said, "We will think hard about the things that we need to do to make sure this never happens again." Well played, Korean soccer team. I hope that was intentional. Either way, the whole situation is pretty funny. 43-year-old James Fairbanks was arrested in Omaha this week after confessing to murder to media outlets and Facebook. According to his confession, Fairbanks came across 64-year-old Matteo Condalucci while looking for an apartment in his neighborhood. Condalucci, as Fairbanks discovered, was a sex offender. He was convicted of a lewd or lascivious assault on a child in Florida in 1994. In February of 2007, he was convicted of sexual assault on a child in Sarpy County. Upon further research, Fairbanks found a Facebook page that a mother of a 5-year-old child who was abused by Condalucci had set up to warn others about him. Fairbanks alleges that he found dozens of other kids in different states that Condalucci had assaulted. He said that when he saw Condalucci was in his driveway pretending to wash his car with nothing but a rag, no soap, no water, while he was watching some kids play. Fairbanks also pointed out that Condalucci had a child's playset in his backyard with no fence and no children of his own. In a statement to the media, Fairbanks said he could no longer sit idle with the possibility of this guy hurting more kids. He returned to the home of Condalucci the evening of the 14th and killed him. Police have not disclosed any further details as the investigation is ongoing. Fairbanks stated that he knows his punishment with our legal system will be far worse than the 2 years that Condalucci served, but he wasn't willing to do nothing. I don't personally think that anyone would object to this man walking free, even if it sets the precedent of murdering child rapists. In which case, let those people go free when that happens too.
Midland County, Michigan had a damn big problem this week when 2 dams overflooded and then collapsed due to heavy torrential rains. The Edenville and Sanford dams breached Tuesday night, prompting the governor to ask everybody to evacuate immediately. Luckily, there have been no reports of deaths or serious injury, but the timing of this couldn't be worse with everything going on with the coronavirus. So now, in addition to the normal challenge of having to put up tents to house these people, they also have to do so in a manner that keeps people 6 feet apart. It's a huge pain in the ass. Teams are screening everybody they're putting into these tents, and there's plenty of PPE to go around. The Michigan National Guard is on site with high water vehicles, which, if anything else, probably looks pretty cool. People don't know exactly what happened, but a 10-year-old boy claims to have broken the dam.
It's my fault. I broke the dam.
But all of the adults in town disagreed. We're hoping for the best for everybody in Michigan, but what do you really say in a time like this? Damn it! President Trump announced Thursday that he plans to pull out of the Open Skies Treaty to very mixed reviews. The Open Skies Treaty allows flyovers by foreign militaries with the owner country's officers literally in the same plane during the flyover. In other words, it's kind of like gentlemanly spying. The real intent was that during the Cold War, Russia and America were always worried about the other country building some new weapon or more nukes or whatever, and they wanted to prevent a situation where people maybe misread something and escalated the war, or worse, that you'd send a spy plane over the country, it would get shot down, escalate the war, and we'd end up in World War III. Well, lately the United States has been letting Russia continue to do these flyovers, but Russia's sort of been saying, yeah, you can do them, but not over this area, that area, this other area. And Trump ain't about that life. Maybe this thing gets renegotiated and maybe it falls apart and we'll have to just fall back on the crappy plan of using our many, many satellites to spy in exacting detail everywhere that they're not letting us fly over anyway.
But that's not the only story out there that shows the president's pullout game is strong. President Trump announced that America will fully halt its funding of the World Health Organization unless it commits to substantive improvements over the next 30 days. In a 4-page letter, Trump outlined how much he thinks the WHO sucks and how it's been spreading disinformation fed to it from China. He blames the WHO for failing to produce the correct information for combating the coronavirus, which led to unnecessary deaths. When asked to go into detail about what the steps will be for the US involvement with the WHO, Trump had this to say: "I can't explain, but we're not going to take it. There's no substitute anyhow, anyway, anywhere for how many of my friends of my generation are in fragments. I'm not just putting up an eminence front, pure and easy. This is no trick of the light. Let's see action." Another reporter tried to chime in to his statement, but he just asked them, "Who are you?"
And now we bring you the case of the disappearing CEO. Carlos Ghosn was once the CEO of Nissan Motors Corporation and resided in Japan. That is until he grossly underreported his income and diverted some Nissan money into personal accounts. His side of the story was that the Nissan payments were totally legit. But secret. However, he was arrested, charged, and jailed. Ghosn, a man of extreme wealth, was able to post bail. Then he did what any man would do in that situation. He hired a U.S. Green Beret and his son to smuggle him out of the country in a box on a chartered jet. Michael Taylor, a 59-year-old Green Beret, his son Peter, and their sidekick George are wanted by Japan for helping Ghosn escape the country after he was out on bail. The men were arrested by the U.S. Marshal Service in Massachusetts. The elder Taylor, Michael, is a lot like Chris Helmsworth in the movie Extraction, in that he extracts people. He's been hired by parents to rescue children. He's been hired by the FBI and the military to essentially do the same thing. He's got a pretty cool gig. Anyway, old Taylor and George show up in Japan pretending to be musicians with these huge boxes that they claim they need to hold audio equipment. They stuffed Ghosn in one of these boxes in a hotel and then put him on the plane, flew that plane to Turkey, and then flew from Turkey to Lebanon, where Ghosn is a citizen. Lebanon has a non-extradition treaty with Japan. There, Ghosn went public, said he was in Lebanon, and said that he left because he wasn't going to get a fair shake in Japan and he is innocent. And while we're all going to have to wait and see how that plays out, I think we can all agree that Ghosn and Taylor are really great at thinking inside the box.
Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves went live on Facebook to read off the recent high school graduates of Mississippi. The official reading was a show of respect for the young graduating minds who otherwise won't get a send-off because of the Rona. Governor Reeves read each name, congratulated each student, including one Harry Ascrack. The reading has since gone viral, but the government took it in stride, saying that the writer of Harry Ascrack has a bright future as a writer for The Simpsons. And after a brief pause, the governor went on to congratulate this year's honor students: Mike Hunt, Ben Dover, Buster Hyman, Justin Casey Feltersnatch, Suk Medik, Craven Moorhead, Anita Koch, Mike Hawk, Haywood Jablomi, Jack Mehoff, Oliver Closeoff, Mike Oxlong, Amanda Hugginkiss, Jenna Tulls, Phil McCracken, and Stu Pedasso.
Pro-democracy Hong Kong legislator Dennis Kwok stated this week, "This is the end of Hong Kong." This week, China will attempt to impose highly contested national security laws known as Article 23 of their mini-constitution. If enacted, the law basically states that Hong Kong must take measures to avoid succession, sedition, or basically any pushback against the Chinese government. This law has never been enacted, as most people realize it's a stepping stone to China taking over Hong Kong completely. It was also written by the English for Hong Kong and Hong Kong alone to execute if they saw fit. It is not China's right to enact this. The last time China tried to do this in 2003, over 500,000 protesters took to the street, stopping the measure in its tracks. But last week, China struck a huge blow to the pro-democracy movement. One of the 5 points that protesters hoped to accomplish was to limit police brutality against Hong Kong. The Independent Police Complaints Council, essentially a watchdog unit in Hong Kong, ruled that there are no incidents of police brutality against protesters. They basically said it was the protesters' fault for protesting and that they shouldn't be using police brutality as a political tool. I look forward to Nike giving the Hong Kong protesters their own shoe. Despite hundreds of videos and personal accounts of police brutality, the pro-Beijing party grinds forward. The protests have begun again as coronavirus measures begin to lift. Social media posts from pro-democracy candidates once again are calling for Hong Kongers to take to the streets and fight. And as one person tweeted, Hong Kongers will not be scared off. We're with you, Hong Kong. And finally, in Florida Man news, Thomas Morgan, 57, is facing charges of aggravated assault and animal cruelty. On Saturday, Morgan was sitting at home, minding his own business, when he got into a verbal argument with his annoying sister. Things escalated quickly, and he did what any normal brother would do and punched his sister in the face, and then grabbed the little bird perched on her shoulder and whipped it to the ground, killing it. Then, as brothers do when they're joshing with their sister, he fired rounds over her head when she reached down to pick up her beloved dead bird, then held the gun to her head and told her he was gonna kill her. Ha ha! You know, just typical family stuff. Police, however, blew the whole thing out of proportion. And as they dragged Morgan away, he was heard to say, "Is this even America anymore?" And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already. And have a great Memorial Day, folks.